Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Natalie Rodriguez, and I am with the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, a program of the National Institute of Justice. Before we get started, I will go over how you can view and interact with today's webinar. The first thing I'll draw your attention to is the chat pod, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen next to the player window. The chat is the best way to communicate any questions you have regarding today's material. All questions will be retained until the Q&A session after the presentation. The chat is also the best way to let our support team know if you are experiencing any technical issues. Simply post a short description of the issues you are having, and our audience support team will assist you. If for some reason you happen to lose the audio or video during the live stream, the first thing you should do is refresh your web browser and then click the play button in the middle of the player window. If this does not work or you experience any other technical issues, please use the chat to notify our support team. You can also contact us with any customer support issues with the FTCOE toll-free number or email address located directly above the player window. We will begin today's webinar shortly, but first, please take a moment to type your location into the chat so we can get an idea of where everyone is joining us from today, as well as confirm that the chat is working properly. For today's webinar, we have Melissa Colmenero from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and Barbara Hoover from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation presenting on the legalization of marijuana, the journey of marijuana laws in Colorado and Ohio. Without further delay, here's Melissa and Barbara.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to speak to you today about the journey through Colorado marijuana laws since medical marijuana was legalized approximately 20 years ago and recreational marijuana became legalized approximately a decade ago. I'm going to present the timeline of legalization in the state of Colorado, how the 2018 Farm Bill has affected the analyst, some marijuana trends throughout the state over the past decade, and how the CBI approaches casework and analysis. In November of 2000, Colorado passed Amendment 20, which allowed for the use of medical marijuana. In 2010, the legislature created a medical marijuana code, CRS 12-43.3-101. This established a dual licensing system which regulated medical cannabis businesses at both the state and local level. Two state agencies would oversee different aspects of the program. The Department of Public Health and Environment would regulate the patient and caregiver registry, while the Marijuana Enforcement Division of the Department of Revenue would regulate dispensaries, cultivation, and manufacturing. In November of 2012, recreational marijuana passed as Amendment 64. This declaration that marijuana should be regulated in a manner similar to alcohol. Amendment 64 allowed Colorado adults ages 21 or older permissible to cultivate up to 6 marijuana plants, with 3 or fewer being mature plants, and legally possess up to 1 ounce while traveling. With Colorado seeming to pave the way in the cannabis industry, provisions for industrial hemp was written into Amendment 64. This states that, in the interest of enacting rational policies for the treatment of all variations of the cannabis plant, people of Colorado further find and declare that industrial hemp should be regulated separately from strains of cannabis with higher delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentrations. In 2021, Governor Polis signed House Bill 1090, which allows a person to carry 2 ounces of cannabis instead of 1. In addition to this extension, the records of users previously charged with Class 3 marijuana possession and cultivation felonies would be cleared. And while Colorado with cannabis trending, the 2018 Farm Bill went into effect, which removed hemp from the federal definition in the Controlled Substance Act. It defines hemp as containing a concentration of delta-9 THC to be no more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. It does allow states to restrict or prohibit cultivation. However, states cannot prohibit the transportation or shipment of hemp or hemp products that were lawfully produced. So how has this affected cannabis use in Colorado? The following slide shows some data collected by the Rocky Mountain High and Sin City drug trafficking area, the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, the impact 2021. First of all, the state has increased population size by about 1 million people. There has been an increase in fatalities of drivers testing positive for marijuana, The increase in data collected may also be attributed to the fact that in 2019, CBI eliminated all fees associated with toxicology testing paid by coroners, counties, and local law enforcement agencies. The intent was to both reduce the burden and the cost of testing to local agencies, as well as to increase data collection on the impact of marijuana legalization. This meant that all submitted samples would be screened for THC. There was a sharp increase in poison control marijuana exposure data almost immediately after the legalization of marijuana, and there's a sharp increase after a couple of years. However, it has steadily climbed since then. Reported investigations show that from 2018 to 2020, there was a significant increase in seized THC concentrate, but there was also a decrease in number of felony arrests, although this number may have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. Plant seizures significantly increased from around 7,000 plants in 2013 to over 86,000 plants in 2020. Pounds of marijuana seizures increased from about 1.5 million in 2013 to 11 million in 2020. Felony arrests haven't wavered too much over this time. Interdiction seizures that originated in Colorado increased since legalization of marijuana in 2012, but has relatively declined after a couple of years. In 2021, an article came out in the Denver Post that highlighted how the black market has taken over many neighborhoods in the state. It highlighted one of the biggest raids in the state that occurred in 2019. 250 homes and businesses were raided in the Denver metro area. There were dozens of arrests, 80,000 plants seized, and $2.2 million in assets, which included luxury cars. The money was laundered through family restaurants. This is a continual problem. Not too much time passes before there is another news story of persons arrested for turning their homes into a grow house. The illicit marijuana team was created in 2018. The purpose of this team is to expand local law enforcement's abilities, specifically in rural jurisdictions of Colorado, to address, investigate, and prevent the cultivation, distribution, and exportation of black market marijuana, ensure the quality of life for Colorado residents and visitors, legal and regulated marijuana industry, and to protect the environment from harmful and illegal growing operations that cause destructive and permanent damage. The team is comprised of 12 CBI investigators and 1 crime analyst. In 2019, the team had 36 cases, dismantled 82 illegal grow sites, had 49 arrests, seized 25,161 plants, and 5,487 pounds of processed plant material. How has this impacted laboratory analysis? First, we rarely see small quantities of plant material. I would say the most plant material items submitted to the laboratory for analysis are actually above 2 ounces, and many are bulk seizures of approximately 50 pounds. Samples from multiple plants are often submitted for testing for cultivation charges. Many times we have multiple items from dispensaries that are submitted to the laboratory for testing. However, if the items are sealed and labeled appropriately from the dispensary, which most often means that the label will contain the percent THC, the analyst has the option to not analyze those items. Right around the time when recreational marijuana was legalized, food products and tinctures were readily seen in submissions, but to date there are few and far between. Colorado law charges by weight thresholds regardless of mixture or purity. Therefore, our analysts will usually analyze items to a weight threshold. This slide defines each threshold as stated in the Colorado revised statute. Prior to 2020, we were analyzing material using a swig drug category C test and 2 category B tests, which were the Duquesnoy-Levine and the macro and microscopic examinations. The analysts would then report that they identified marijuana. In 2020, we realized we were seeing a steady increase in hemp. We also realized that courtroom testimony was getting harder to explain, that the plant material has not been quantitated in most cases, so we therefore cannot distinguish by definition hemp versus marijuana. We decided the best practice would be to run every analyzed plant material item on the GCMS, and instead of reporting marijuana, we would report the identified cannabinoid or cannabinoids, and in parentheses the statement, a component of marijuana. The analysts still have the option to use microscopic and macroscopic examinations, but they can no longer rely on these 2 tests alone. Duquesnoy-Levine test is still most commonly used presumptive color test in the laboratory. However, the 4-AP test is also available for use as a color test. Unlike other agencies, we do not use the 4-AP test to triage plant material. There were still setbacks with courtroom testimony and getting our law enforcement agencies to understand why we had used the word marijuana in our statements if we did not quantify the material. So in 2021, we changed our reporting statements again to read the identified cannabinoid or cannabinoids, in parentheses, a component of cannabis. Due to budget and personnel constraints, we cannot quantify every item that is submitted. So we have opted to report out a major cannabinoid if the abundance is greater than 50% compared to another identified cannabinoid, and hopes to better assist our local law enforcement agencies prepare their case. We have found that many times just by reporting a case where CBD is the major cannabinoid, the agencies will dismiss charges and the plant material will not have to be quantitated. There is a disclaimer statement on the report stating the quantitative analysis was not done on the item, and it's just a comparison of the abundance. As you can see, we have analyzed less cannabis items since 2012. Since we have started running the items on GCMS, we've also been able to identify multiple other cannabinoids other than THC and CBD. And this slide is a visual of the numbers from the previous slide. Because we did not know how the Farm Bill would impact our analysis, CBI decided to be proactive and began validating a quantitative method using HPLC UV-DAD in 2018. We went online in January of 2019. Currently, we only quantitate plant material. It is requested that a minimum of 7 grams is submitted for analysis, and prior to any analysis, the agency must reach out to CBI to get approval for analysis. Most cases that have been requested for quantitative analysis have been large seizures. One key note that we like to mention to the agencies is that they should first look into if the grower has an active registration to grow hemp. If not, they are still out of compliance with the state laws, regardless if they have true hemp versus marijuana. We thermally convert the THCA to THC. This slide is showing the 13 standard mix, including the internal standard that is used in the method. The sample is ran before decarboxylation and after decarboxylation. Our quantitative method is designed to detect percent THC between 0.01 and 10%. If the percentage falls out of this range, the analyst will report that it is either not detected above the quantitative reporting limit or that it is greater than 10%. We also have a statement that is put on each report stating that the tetrahydrocannabinols include the thermal conversion of delta-9 THC and delta-9 THCA. Our operating manuals are online if anyone is interested. Chemistry 1020 describes the detailed process for a quantitative analysis. I would like to acknowledge our chemistry section who have contributed over the last several years to get us to the point where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And now we will turn it over to Barbara.
Thanks for having me here today. This is my first experience of actually presenting in this manner, like not in person. So let's just see how this goes. Today I want to talk about our journey, VCI's journey through the Ohio marijuana laws. So our journey started with medical marijuana back in 2016. It was followed by the decriminalization of hemp in 2019. And now we are possibly looking towards the legalization of marijuana in the future. Okay, so starting with House Bill 523, medical marijuana. The House approved the measure May 10th. The Senate passed it May 25th. And on June 8th, the governor signed it into effect. The medical marijuana law went into effect on September 8th of 2016. It allows for the possession of THC-related items such as marijuana, gummies, for medical purposes. So although it seems like this went really fast, it only being from May 10th to September 8th, it did take about a year after that to actually get it up and running. They needed to authorize the doctors. They needed to set up the dispensaries. They had to issue cards to those patients that were allowed to get this. And so it did take a long time, about a year, that it went into effect. Now, how did it affect us and what was our response? There was really no change in our testing. The burden mostly fell on law enforcement agencies to determine whether or not the evidence was possessed legally or illegally. So it really didn't change what we were seeing or how much we were seeing. After this came Senate Bill 57, which was the decriminalization of hemp. So this basically changed the definition of marijuana in Ohio. Hemp and hemp products, such as CBD oil, containing no more than 0.3% of THC, were no longer considered marijuana in Ohio. Therefore, they were legal to use. So this was kind of Ohio's answer to the Farm Bill. It gave farmers a new crop to produce and sell. And so that was the reason that this was happening. It was passed September 30th, 2019, and became effective the very same day. So BCI's response was, so what does this mean to us? Well, what it meant was we no longer could identify marijuana by historical means. We used to use the Ducanoid-Levine along with the GC mass spec. So we realized that couldn't happen anymore because it didn't give us the information that we needed. So we looked at different things. We looked at the over-under color test, such as the 4-aminophenol test. And these kinds of tests either was, if there was a very lot of THC compared to the CBD, you would get one color. If it was the other way around and say the CBD was 3 times larger than the THC, you would get a different color. Well, we looked at that, but also thought that we needed to give our law enforcement agencies and our courts more information than that, especially since there was that, 0.3% actually written in the law. So what we decided was that we would need to develop a quantitative method for determining the THC content of any cannabis-related evidence, marijuana, hashish, THC, infused products, whatever. First thing we did was we formed a quant group. And this group consisted of 10 chemistry analysts. They were chosen to validate new methods and train as quant analysts. So the lab director, chemistry manager, supervisors from the chemistry sections, and QA personnel, we all worked together with the quant group to determine what was needed to develop a quantitative method for determining the THC content. One thing I want to say real quick about that, though, when we did this, those 10 chemists were about 1/4 of our total number of chemists that we had working in the state. So that being said, we'll go on to the task that we decided that we needed to do to make this happen. Well, we needed to do a lot of research. We needed to find funding for this. We also need to look at what instrument needs we have and a lot of training. There was going to be a lot of training, and we needed to validate a method for this type of testing. And there was a lot of administration preparations that also needed to be done. So we started with research. We read a lot of literature, looked up a lot of internet searches, that type of thing, not only on what instruments would be best, but also, different kinds of methods and just the whole gamut. We had to learn from the beginning. We attended webinars, and those were very helpful as well from laboratories that were already going through this or were already doing it. We did contact some of those labs, seeing how they did it, and what happened good and what happened bad. So next we had to look at, well, how much is this going to cost and where can we get the funding? We did get funding from the state. We also got some monies from different grants that helped us. The monies that we got mostly were for instrumentation and training. We did not get any new analysts in this funding. So we looked at instrumentation and we said, can we use our existing instrumentation? Well, at the time we used GC mass spec for THC identification. And the only other instrument types that we had in our lab was a GCFIDs, and we also had some IRs in our lab. Well, we couldn't use the GC mass spec because it uses high temperature. And as we all know, THCA, a component of the total THC, breaks down under heat. So that wasn't going to work for us. So we then started looking at the LCUVMS. It doesn't use heat, but our problem with this was we didn't have any of these. We didn't do any kind of LC work in our laboratory at that time. So what we did is we contacted two different vendors, and they both gave us a demo. And we got to work with these demos and work with both of these vendors on how to use them. They were two different brands. We put them in two different labs, and we were trying to determine which ones met our needs best and which ones would give us what we needed. We ended up moving forward with only one vendor, and then we purchased 4 additional ones. So we put, there were 2 in 2 different labs, and then one lab only had 1. The other instrumentation that we needed to purchase were a water purification system. We needed a freezer mill sample prep system, moisture analyzer, analytical balances, sonicators, vortex, and variable volume mechanical pipettes. So we have 3 labs. We had to purchase everything times 3. So we would have all of these in each lab. The training was extensive. We had never done this type of testing before. We had never worked with this type of instrument. So it was just like starting from scratch learning. They had all new preparation methods, different ways you had to prepare your samples in order to use the instrument. The instrument use alone was totally new. The data looked different. Everything was different. So it was quite a undertaking, and a lot of work and a lot of time was involved. We also had to validate some type of a procedure. So we could do this. We had to consider different types of samples, vegetation, oils, edibles, anything else that came into the lab or were invented by those doing this. We wrote a validation procedure. It needed to be approved by our QA department, and it also had to make sure that it was in our accreditation standards. So that was an undertaking. And finally, we got that done and everything was approved. Then we needed to acquire samples so we could actually do this type of testing. Some of the CBD samples we got actually from different people who were doing the CBD for testing, some of the places in Ohio that were doing it. Also, we got some from departments on cases that we had worked and that they had gone through the court system, and instead of destroying the evidence, they gave it back to us for us to work with. We went through several months, many months of testing. There was a lot of trial and error and a lot of learning going on there. The validation was finally approved on April 19th, 2020, but just for vegetation and oils. We weren't going to go with the edibles yet because there was some issues that we had with getting the gummies and everything to actually so we could prep them properly. So rather than spend any more time on that, we decided to just go with the vegetation and oils at that time. There was a lot of administration preparation. We sent a letter to prosecutors addressing our capabilities, what we were doing, how we were going to do it. But because it was effective immediately, we got tons of questions, tons of calls. So we sent out a letter kind of saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to be able to do. We created a quant assignment category and started separating all quant evidence from chemistry cases. We basically made a section out of our chemistry section. So now we have chemistry, and then we have chemistry quant section. We also had to create new report formats for that type of testing, because it didn't really fall into what we were doing with our regular chemistry cases. We gave presentations to law enforcement agencies so they would understand what we were doing and what the new reports meant and that type of thing. We also then needed to prepare competency tests for these scientists. We had to have some sort of a test to say that they were qualified in doing this type of testing. And then we had to give them authorization to perform this quantitative casework. And this was given individually. They had to earn it through their training and through their competency testing. We also had to create a submission policy for THC-related evidence. That we had to say, okay, it has to be at least this much, or we won't have enough to actually test it. That type of thing also went out. So there was a lot of paperwork, a lot of forms to make, a lot of, T's to cross and I's to dot here. I just put this slide in just so you could see kind of how it reads when our reports read. So we give the amount and then we call it THC. We call it marijuana with a THC content of, and we give that content. And that is all calculated on a dry weight basis. All of these things had to play into doing this type of testing. THC reported by BCI means total THC. And as you can see there, it is the sum of the percentage by weight of THC, acid THCA multiplied by 0.87 plus the percentage by weight of delta 9. So all of this was stuff we put into our reports so that it was understood what we were doing and what we were actually reporting out. Because this was effective immediately upon passing, and we obviously weren't ready for a long time, it would take about a year for us to actually begin doing the testing. So this meant that the number of cases that needed quantitative testing, anything submitted on or after July 30th, began growing way before we even got a chance to try to do any of this testing. At the time we started the testing, there was about 600 cases waiting to be tested in that queue there when we started. Also at this time, our regular chem cases, because we took almost over 1/4 of our staff out to go to quant, we started falling behind in there as well, and our queue there began to grow also. So right now, at this time, due to the increase in the regular qualitative cases we were doing, we have taken half of those quant analysts. 5 of them have returned to doing regular casework because it was really getting out of hand, and we needed to make some kind of a decision there. We also decided on a triage policy for our quant cases. We no longer do any misdemeanors or minor misdemeanors are not tested. Quant is not needed if the cannabis charge is less or equal to the chem charge. So if you would have, say, heroin in the case, and if that charge would be higher than if we tested the quant case and the quant item would not be as high or equal to, then we're not going to do the quant. Okay, the quant just would not be done. It would just be sent back, not tested. We also started to prioritize felony 3s and higher. So anything that was felony 1, a felony 2, and a felony 3, they would get worked first before the 4s and 5s, which we also accept, but those would be farther down in the thing. At this time, we are pretty much working the F3s and higher as they come in the door. We're getting those done. And then if we get any lag time at all, which isn't a lot, we will start picking up the 4s and 5s. So we're working on it, and that's the way we're handling it at this time. So next, we're looking at marijuana legalization, possibly. We have a group in Ohio called the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, and they are the people pushing this along the way. On January 28th of this year, it was announced that the campaign had collected enough signatures that it could go to a vote with the lawmakers of Ohio. Well, that would make it up to lawmakers to approve or not approve. However, the Ohio Senate president says, no, we're not going to make that decision. It will have to go to the ballot. So basically what it would do, it would legalize possession up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis for adults 21 and older. And they could also have 15 grams of marijuana concentrates. They could go up to 6 plants for personal use with a maximum of 12 plants per household. It also had other things in there that they would be required to have 40 recreational cultivator license and 50 adult user retail licenses, so the people where they could buy it and that stuff. So there was a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in this law. It isn't just, oh, well, it is legal. What we think it'll affect us, we don't think it'll affect us that much, mainly because we do not do anything with a misdemeanor charge. And most of these things, this amount of possession would be misdemeanor charges, so we wouldn't be seeing them anyhow. So we don't anticipate a whole lot of change, or we hope for very little change. I want to thank to everybody who provided information for this presentation. I also have my contact information here. Feel free to email me or call me if you have any questions that are not covered in the question and answer session following this. Thank you for listening.
Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and move into our Q&A. So we're going to turn our cameras on, stop sharing, and here we are. Alrighty, Melissa and Barbara, thank you so much for that informative presentation. We're going to go ahead and jump right into some questions that we've received. Melissa, I have one here for you. When quantifying THC, do you take account any possible presence of Delta 8 THC or other isomers of Delta 9 THC?
So currently we do not do that in our process. However, we have noticed an increase of Delta 8 THC cannabinoids identified in our plant material during qualitative analysis. So this is something that we could put on our radar for the future.
Gotcha. Thank you for that answer there. All right, Barbara, we had one come in for you here just now. How did your customers respond to your triage system? We are attempting to establish a similar system, but are receiving some pushback.
We got a little bit of pushback in the beginning, and we still are getting some because our 4s and 5s are taking longer to get out. But for the most part, they are just really happy that we are doing the quantitation and they're getting some results at all. So we're getting a little bit, but mostly they have accepted it and have been really good about it.
Thank you for that answer there. To follow that up, there's another question here. Are your customers, aka Ohio law enforcement agencies and Ohio courts, happy with the reporting?
Yes, they are. We pretty much give them everything they need. We give them an exact number. We tell them exactly how much THC is in their product. And so it makes it really easy for them to then take it into court and follow the law.
Gotcha. That's good. Melissa, I'm going to toss it back over to you here. Would you consider doing a semi-quant method?
We have considered that, and we are actually looking into developing a method based on some information we received from other agencies that do that. We've considered it because it is time consuming to do full quants. And just because of limited people and time that we have in our laboratory, and because it probably does not do justice by just mentioning a major cannabinoid on our report statements, we are wanting to take a step further and trying to develop a semi-quant method, but we are not there yet.
Thank you for your answer there. Yeah, definitely. Barbara, I want to come in for you here. Was the decriminalization the reason for not analyzing misdemeanor cases?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yes, we didn't do minor misdemeanor anyhow before that on marijuana cases, but because of the backlog and because of all of this, that's why we stopped doing the misdemeanor at all. Like that was part of it.
Gotcha, thank you. Prioritizing is quite difficult. Alrighty, I have a question actually, and then either of you are welcome to jump in here, but can anyone speak to the device being developed by Hemp Synergistics LLC and Purdue University? Has anyone heard of that?
I have not heard of that.
Have I heard of that? All right, we'll keep our eyes out for that. Okay, Barbara, I have another one that just came in for you. Are you holding on to edible cases for now, or are you reporting them in some other format?
Right now, we are not accepting them. So no, we're not hanging on to them. They just don't come in the door. We have sent out information to law enforcement agencies saying that we do not have the ability to test them at this time. Therefore, we're not accepting them.
Gotcha, thank you, yeah. Okay, Melissa, I had another one come in for you just now from the audience. Can you explain what are marijuana concentrates? This is the first time one of our audience members have heard this term.
Yeah, so marijuana concentrate, as we used to refer to them, was anything that was not plant material. So anything that was allowing extraction of the THC from the plant to be put into another form, usually as in like a wax form, hashish, oils, things like that. So those would be reported out as marijuana concentrate. Per Colorado revised statutes, we did have a statement for that as well. And so that's basically what those items had referred to.
Gotcha, thank you for that explanation there. Let's see, Barbara, bring it back over here to you. Is there a time difference in doing qualitative versus quantitative testing?
Yes, there's a huge difference. You know, I would say if before, when we would do a marijuana case compared to the way it takes now is probably 20 times as long. It takes at least to do it now. There is so much more time in the sample prep, also in the running time, obviously, and then reading all of the data and everything. So yes, it's a big jump.
Yeah, that's quite a significant difference there in time, for sure. Okay, one came in here for you, Melissa. You mentioned that regardless of percentage, you analyze to a weight threshold. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, so to clarify, this is in regards to a qualitative analysis, not a quantitative analysis. And per Colorado laws, we do not have to give a purity for any of the material that's being analyzed. And so the charges are based on the weight of the material itself. So regardless of the purity of the material, when we do analysis, we will do it according to the weight thresholds that are set forth by and that's set forth in the Colorado revised statutes.
Thank you. That's a good explanation there, for sure. Let's see here. And here's another one that came in from the audience, and this is for either or both of you. How are synthetic THC cases, Delta 8, Delta 10, THC 0, acetate, being handled in your respective states?
I can speak to that. As far as Colorado goes, the way we are reporting currently, just because marijuana, quote unquote, marijuana is considered legal, we don't have any schedules that are associated with marijuana. So any of the cannabinoids that are a part of the plant itself don't necessarily have a schedule associated with it. So when we do analysis and we report out a cannabinoid, we would just say, if we identify Delta 8, again, it would be like, as we do with anything else, it would state something like Delta 8, or analysis identified Delta 8 THC, a component of cannabis, or Delta 10 THC, or a combination thereof. So right now, we don't really have a different classification or a different penalty for those. It's just all getting reported out the same as every other cannabinoid.
Over to you, Barbara. Do you have any more information for that for you guys?
Yeah, we don't test it any different. Depending on what we find is what we report out. If it doesn't have THC Delta 9 in the amount needed, then it is, we report that out. If it does have something else, it would be a cannabinoid, but again, we don't do any difference in the analysis.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you for your both states' perspectives there for that question. Let's see here. Melissa, I have one over here for you. Has the major cannabinoid statement been challenged in court because it does not reflect a quantitative analysis?
So it has not been challenged. We have had on occasion having to answer a few more questions in regard to it, but we do explain that we do have a quantitative method available, and the material could be forwarded for quantitative analysis, but it usually doesn't get to that point because prior to going to court, we've already discussed with the law enforcement agency and the prosecutors kind of the path that we've taken, and it's been left up to them if they want to pursue the full quantitative analysis or not. So usually it's either the question is not really asked, or it can be explained in a few additional statements.
Gotcha. Thank you for your answer there. Yeah, I'm sure seems like a very fast changing landscape here for everyone involved. We're going to give another minute to see if any questions come through the Q&A. If you guys have anything you wanted to add or ask each other, feel free, but we're just, we'll make sure the audience has a final chance here to send them some questions. And actually, in the time I was filling the air here, we had one come in for you, Melissa. It says, you mentioned reporting the main cannabinoid if it was larger than 50% compared to the others. Could you explain that a little further?
Yeah, so when looking at the tick and you look at the y-axis of the tick, you have the abundance that's listed. So we will compare, again, this is not a qualitative mathematical comparison. It's just looking at the tick itself. And if the abundance is at least 50% or more greater than any other cannabinoid, then we are reporting it as a major cannabinoid. We also have a statement at the end of the reports kind of giving a disclaimer to that as well, saying this is not a quantitative analysis, but it just kind of gives a perspective to the prosecutors and to the law enforcement agencies investigating that the plant material may have mostly CBD, for example, in it. And so that gives them the option of whether they want to pursue charges against the defendant or not. And many times just reporting it out as a major cannabinoid has changed the course of their investigation or the way they prosecute.
Thank you for elaborating on that, definitely. Alrighty, I do not see any further questions coming in, but if there aren't any further ones, we might just go ahead and close out this webinar today. But if anybody out in the audience has any more, we have in the archive Melissa and Barbara's emails available if you think of any more questions. We appreciate you, Melissa and Barbara, being here with us today and providing such informative presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before you leave today's webinar, please participate in our short 5-minute survey. Simply click the checkbox icon directly above the chat to access the audience feedback survey for today's event. Your feedback is critical information that helps us improve our webinars and continue providing the best experience possible. We would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, across the top of the live stream window are links to our social media profiles, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. There is also a link to the FDCOE website, the Just Science podcast, and the FDCOE newsletter registration. Like, follow, or subscribe to stay up to date with everything the FDCOE is doing in support of the forensic community. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.